What is an addiction that you beat, and how? Alcohol from pure willpower and telling myself if I have one more drink, I will go to AA. Then Adderall 2 years later because I didn't even realize I'm a straight-up addict and let that take over next. I flushed the pills and told my psychiatrist to never write a script again, so I'm allergic now on paper. Then nicotine cold turkey by using marijuana heavily instead. Now I am 2 weeks fully sober after stopping marijuana cold turkey while using working out to replace my final addiction. These last 2 weeks of growth have been insane. If I lived like this my whole life, I would be so much more accomplished.
That's quite a journey. It's interesting how many different ways people try to cope with addiction. By the end, it seems like you found what worked best for you with exercise. Those 2 weeks of growth sound like they really made an impact. It shows how changing habits can open up new perspectives on life. Here's to the progress and whatever comes next.
I stopped drinking alcohol in a process. 1. Quit cold turkey. Replace the beer with non-alcoholic beer. 2. Up my gym time by a lot. I've lost 62 pounds so far. Also started going on walks with my kids more often. 3. Whenever I wanted to drink, I went outside and smoked my pipe, usually listening to David Sylvian. 4. Stopped going to any events where alcohol would be served. 5. Convinced my wife to promise me that if I even say anything related to alcohol, no sex that week. 6. I put 10,000 yen, just over $60, in a jar every month I didn't drink. Every year on my sobriety anniversary, buy myself something nice.
That's a solid approach. Quitting cold turkey can be tough, but swapping beer for non-alcoholic options seems smart. Regular gym visits and family walks sound like a good way to stay active too. Using a pipe instead of drinking might help with cravings. Avoiding events is wise. That incentive for staying sober with the jar is a neat idea, giving you something to look forward to each year.
I used to be a vape addict, vaping all day from morning until bedtime. I noticed it made my breathing shorter and left me feeling more tired throughout the day. I quit cold turkey. Now, I'm an occasional smoker, having a cigarette about once a month when partying with friends. Surprisingly, cigarettes aren't as addictive as vaping.
It's interesting how habits change. I know someone who was really into vaping too. They said it messed with their energy levels and made them feel off. Quitting was tough for them, but now they only smoke once in a while at parties. Seems like they found a balance. It's kind of surprising how different the two really are in terms of addiction.
I haven't fully beaten it yet, but I'm working on getting rid of gambling addiction from my life. The online casino epidemic is really rough. Crypto casinos are not regulated at all and too accessible at all times. But I'm running a system right now where every time I buy crypto to gamble, I instead stake the crypto instantly on an exchange.
It's definitely a tough situation with online casinos and gambling addiction. I've seen friends struggle with it too. It can be hard to resist the temptation, especially with how easy it is to access. It's good to hear you're trying a new approach by staking instead of gambling. Hopefully, that helps you regain some control. Just takes time and effort. Keep working on it.
OCD. I went through most of high school with this. At the time, as far as anyone in my family knew, there were no treatments for it. So, basically, I had to deal with it myself. After several years, I just got tired of the mental loop it put me in. This has to be said just right, or repeated. That has to be done just right, or repeated. It got really old to the point that eventually I just told myself that I can't do it anymore. I was driving myself crazy, and, well, I forced myself to stop. It wasn't easy at all. My brain was telling me you didn't do it right, and pushing me to get back into the same damn loop. But despite the anxiety it caused at first, it got gradually easier until I finally stopped. It still pops up sometimes, but I can usually get ahead of it and just walk away from that loop that was trying to get started again.
That's a tough experience. Dealing with OCD like that can be really draining. I get how the mental loop can feel endless. It's cool that you found a way to break free from it, even if it took time. It's good to hear you can handle it better now. Sometimes just stepping away is the best option. It's all about progress, not perfection, right? Keep taking it one day at a time.
Meth. The biggest thing that helped me was I'd see how foolish people older than me acted, and a lot of the times they were in shitty situation, and I just didn't want that to be me. I also almost lost communication with my parents because of it, and am already adopted. I didn't want to lose another family, but now I'm a year and 23 days off, and it's been great.
It's cool that you found a way to stay on track by noticing how others handled their struggles. Seeing the consequences in people's lives can really put things in perspective. Losing touch with family is tough, and being adopted adds another layer to that. Congrats on being a year off it. That's a solid achievement and understandable motivation to keep moving forward. It's all about making the right choices for yourself.
Alcohol. Drank for 7 years out of stress from work. My mother told me one day when I was drunk, I reminded her of my father, who was a big drunk, and put my mother through hell. I've never wanted to end up like my dad, but I did and started the turnaround. 2 days in the gym for 10 months straight, all the while doing outpatient treatment. Sad thing about my outpatient is my therapist committed suicide because of an addiction problem herself. 6 years sober, I have a daughter and fiancé. Freed myself from that stress to not take anxiety meds anymore. Started a small business. Earned a degree.
That's a tough story. It's interesting how a moment of honesty from your mom helped you see your path more clearly. Turning around after years of drinking is a serious challenge, but it sounds like you've made significant progress. It's unfortunate about your therapist, but it's good you're still pushing forward. Now you have a family and a business, which is impressive after such a tough start. Seems like you've really changed your life.
Cigarettes. I actually stopped cold turkey by accident because I decided to wash my ashtray. It filled my house with the worst wet ash smell I've ever smelled in my life, and it stuck to everything. It was so bad that apparently doing so changed how I tasted the smoke. Every cigarette I smoked from then on, even out of fresh, new packs tasted like ash to me, so I quit about a week later and switched to vaping. To this day, any cigarette I try, no matter the brand or occasion, tastes like wet ash, and I can smell it on smokers from a mile away. As an added bonus, I quit vaping about 6 months later because it started giving me horrible headaches. I'd feel perfectly fine, decide to pick up the vape pen, take a hit, and boom, I'd get a migraine. So, same story, I just quit entirely and never looked back. So that's why I'll never do either one again. I quit both 10 years ago.
It's interesting how that happened. Sometimes small things, like washing an ashtray, can change your perspective. I had a similar experience with a friend who quit drinking after a rough night. They said the hangover was so bad it ruined the taste of beer for them. Both stories show how unexpected moments can lead to big changes. Quitting things isn't easy, but sometimes life's little reminders help.
Alcohol. I had a huge depression and anxiety problems 2 years ago. Decided to go see a psychiatrist. I got meds. I was not supposed to mix with alcohol. I've tried, and after just a few days I've noticed a big difference. Straight to actually saying light at the end of a tunnel. I am not abstinent right now, but I definitely do not have a problem. Occasional glass of wine or 1 to 2 beers in a pub still happens like once in 2 to 3 months, but it's not getting wasted every other day.
I get that. A couple of years ago, I was in a tough spot too. Had some anxiety and got into therapy. The doc said to stay away from alcohol, but I had a drink here and there. Not the best idea at the time. Now I just keep it casual. Every few months, I'll grab a beer or a glass of wine. It's nice to enjoy it without overdoing it. Seems like you're in a good place now.
Alcohol. Started drinking when I was 14, and it just never stopped. I used it to cope with childhood trauma and current events. Finally, last year I told myself I was done. Now I'll only have a drink on special occasions. At my worst, I was drinking a bottle of vodka and a 24-pack almost every night after work. Best choice was to stop abusing it. My body feels better, face isn't bloated, and I've lost weight. Plus I feel better, I no longer feel sluggish and gross all the time.
It's good to hear you made that change. Starting at a young age can lead to some rough patterns. Stopping must have been tough, but it sounds like it was worth it. Feeling healthier and more energetic can really shift your perspective on life. Those small wins add up, and it's nice to see you're focusing on the positives now. Staying strong during challenging times is key.
Cigarettes. Quit cold turkey too. All of my friends would quit for weeks at a time, then start right back up again. I made sure not to tell anyone until at least 3 weeks had passed. Didn't want the shame of having to quit a second time, because there would definitely be a third and a fourth. I started when I was 9. I hung out with my older brother's friends. It was strategic. I would do push-ups or jumping jacks whenever I felt a cringe. I'd even force myself to smoke when I didn't feel like it. I also changed my lifestyle. You can't just remove something from your life and expect it to take. Ishos fitness. This was over 30 years ago, and I still cringe for one every now and again.
It's interesting how you tied fitness into quitting. Makes sense though. I remember a friend who used to do similar things when trying to quit. He started running every morning instead of reaching for a smoke. It was tough for him at first, but over time, he felt better. He still talks about those cravings, even years later. It seems those habits stick around.
Nicotine. Vaped daily for 8 years. Got really into the hobbyist side of it. Wife got pregnant, and I knew I didn't want my kids around that or seeing me constantly step outside like I had to do with my parents. Tossed it all in the trash that day. Over 4 years later, and I'll still find myself reaching for a vape, doing random tasks just to remember it's gone and continuing to crave it.
It's interesting how life changes priorities. After vaping for years, it must have been tough to just throw it all away. I can get the instinct to reach for it out of habit, especially with how long you were into it. But it's good you made that decision for your kids. Shows growth and responsibility, even if the cravings linger. It's a reminder of how these habits can stick with us.
Cigarettes. Quit cold turkey after numerous half-assed attempts. What worked for me? Getting rid of all the smoking paraphernalia, the lighters, the emergency stash, the old coffee can on the balcony for an ashtray. Just making it so that if I wanted to smoke, I'd have to take 5 minutes going to the store, etc. Somehow, making it that bit of an effort more was enough to get me through so I wouldn't break down and have a smoke.
It's interesting how removing the temptation can really help. A friend of mine had a similar experience. He got rid of all his stuff too, like the lighters and any leftover cigarettes. Just turning it into a hassle made it easier for him to stick to his decision. It's all about finding those little tricks to make it hard to slip back into old habits. Simple but effective, I guess.
Been off nicotine since 2017. Was at work and was getting ready to go out to the smoke pit for a cigarette and decided right then and there to quit. I just threw the pack in the trash and never looked back. Just kicked caffeine a few weeks ago. Worse than quitting nicotine, the headaches and irritability were horrible. Never realized what kind of hold it had on me.
That's a solid move to quit nicotine like that. Just tossing the pack shows some real determination. Kicking caffeine is rough, yeah? The headaches can hit hard. It's interesting how reliant we can get on these things without even noticing. You definitely showed some willpower to take them on. It'll get better in time, though. Gotta appreciate the journey of getting free from those habits.
Had an eating disorder. It took me to see how I looked on a camera to see how I actually looked. Body dysmorphia is real and horrifying when you realize that your brain is lying to you. Gave me my first panic attack seeing that. Since then, I hit the gym, ate more food, and I've never looked back. Sometimes it just takes a splash of good old-fashioned reality.
It's tough how our minds can mess with our perception. I get that feeling of seeing yourself through a different lens and realizing things aren't what they seem. It's good to hear you found your way after that panic attack. Hitting the gym and focusing on healthier habits can really change your mindset. Sometimes a reality check is all it takes to turn things around for the better.
I vaped for 4 years, and I'm almost a year clean. For the first couple days, I always had a Jolly Rancher or mint in my mouth, and I would breath in so the scent would travel into my lungs and feel like it. I'm maxed out on Tylenol and melatonin. I indulged in every craving I felt with food, gaming, and SFW to make it through. After a week, I felt fine and like I never needed it again.
That's solid progress. Quitting something like that isn't easy. Using candy or mint as a substitute makes sense. It's good you found ways to cope, even if it meant relying on Tylenol and melatonin. Gaming and food can distract you, so that's a practical approach. After a week, feeling okay is a relief. Congrats on almost a year. That's a big deal. Keep going.
Tell him, boss. Yeah, man, the psych behind it is crazy, but it really is what makes you you. Especially if you've seen it all and are resilient enough to quit such bad habits. You really get to take that deep breath in. I know when I quit, it just made me really look at things more beautiful in a new perspective. Congrats on staying sober.
It's interesting how personal experiences shape us. I had a friend who dealt with addiction for years. When he finally found the strength to quit, it was like he was seeing the world for the first time. Simple things, like a sunset or a good meal, had new meaning. It's good to hear others sharing similar journeys. Staying sober really does change your perspective on life.
Man, that's what's up. Even if you get that temptation back, just remember all the things you've accomplished thus far, along with all the kind words everyone has told you. 2 other addictions to pay attention to now are sugar and caffeine. If you start rolling down that hill at snowballs, just as quick BC, at least sugar is in everything. I believe that you'll do more than fine from here on out, though. Keep pushing for the people that can't.
It's cool to see someone motivating their friend like that. It's easy to forget the progress you've made during tough times. Recognizing other challenges, like sugar and caffeine, shows a deep understanding of how habits can creep back in. Staying aware is key. It's all about pushing through for yourself and others who need support. Simple reminders can make a big difference in the long run.
As an addict in recovery and a person in therapy for codependency from a very bad upbringing, I think it totally counts and may even be harder to beat depending on the situation. I literally just learned how to say no to people and set healthy boundaries, and I'm 35. God, I hope it gets easier as I keep going.
It's good to hear you're making progress. Learning to say no and set boundaries is tough, especially when you've had a challenging background. It's a crucial step in recovery. Everyone's journey is unique, so take it one day at a time. The hope for easier days ahead is a solid motivator. Just keep focusing on your growth and self-care.
+1 on quitting cigarettes. I came down with a bronchial infection and could barely breathe. Had to use an oxygen tank, and even walking up a few steps left me wheezing. Naturally, the doctors told me I couldn't smoke. Breathing outweighed smoking. Faced with tears of joy a couple weeks later, I was almost back to normal. By then, the worst of the withdrawals had hit, and since I had already gone cold turkey, I figured I might as well keep it up.
That's a solid reason to quit. Sometimes you need a wake-up call to realize how smoking affects you. Getting sick can change your perspective fast. It's good you push through the withdrawals. People underestimate how tough that can be. But in the end, it sounds like you made the right choice for your health. Sticking with it after such a struggle shows you got determination.
I don't know shit about crypto, but don't people lose a lot of money on that too? I was a chronic gambler. Lost the rent more than a few times when I was younger. Lucky my wife stayed with me. I've had alcohol and drug addictions too that were hell. But the gambling addiction clicked cause I realized it was putting my wife's health and well-being in jeopardy. I'd hate to be a compulsive gambler these days with the way society is normalizing it all.
I get that. Addiction can take a toll on relationships. I've seen friends struggle with gambling, spending money they don't have, and it often leads to a mess. It's good you recognize the impact it had on your wife. The normalization of gambling these days is wild. It's essential to talk about it openly so people understand the risks involved. Glad you managed to turn things around for yourself and your family.
I quit weed because every time I would smoke it would make me lethargic. Did it for around 10 years constantly. Would be at family gatherings, yawning, tired AF after smoking. One day at my niece's party, I had ran out of weed/vape. Desperately, I asked my brother-in-law, he smokes sometimes. He said messing around, no. You're fiending for it, aren't you? I said yeah. But really, took a step back and realized how I've depended on weed for so long. The good feeling of weed had completely vanished. It wasn't fun for me anymore. 2 months clean so far. Got way more energy now. Still get sleepy sometimes and fight taking naps. No more overeating. No more feeling like I have to smoke to have fun or enjoy life.
It's interesting how something you rely on for comfort can turn into a burden. I remember a friend who went through a similar phase. He realized he was missing out on life because he was always in a haze. One day, he just stopped. Now he talks about how much better he feels, more energy, and actually enjoying activities rather than half-heartedly participating. It's good to see that clarity can bring back joy.
Same here. I smoked routinely and heavily for over 20 years, then quit cold turkey in case I got drug tested for a job. I was surprised I was able to do it, but the first few weeks were really tough. I live in a legalized state and don't get tested, so I could have started back up a year ago, but my sleep is much better, and after not remembering really any dreams for like 2 decades, I'm having the wildest dreams every single night, and it's honestly my new addiction. I go to bed anticipating what crazy shit I'm about to experience. I can taste, feel, smell, feel emotions with like understanding backstories and history behind why I'm feeling things in my dreams. It's just insane. I feel like I enter the multiverse every night. Anyway, yeah, dreams were my reward for quitting weed, and it's absolutely worth it.
That's an interesting perspective. Quitting something you relied on for so long can be tough. It's cool to hear that the dreams are so vivid now. I also had a phase where I didn't remember dreams, and they seemed so distant. But once I got back into a better sleep routine, it felt like a full experience every night. Those wild dreams can really shift your perspective on rest and recovery.
Thanks, man. Once you get past that first week of withdrawal and anxiety, you start to see life through almost literal new lenses. And you also learn how addicting marijuana really is. Dude, before I quit, I said some BS like marijuana isn't a drug because it isn't addictive the week before. I would say I ate my words, but it was more like I vomited my words. For 2 days straight. Congrats on you staying sober too.
It's interesting how our perception changes after going through tough times. I had a phase where I thought I had everything under control, but then reality hit. The first week was rough, just like you described. It taught me a lot about addiction and how we tend to downplay things. It's a struggle, but it's nice to see someone else on a similar path. Staying sober does bring clarity over time.
In my experience, weed wasn't necessarily a substitute for cigs, but the relaxation really helped with my irritability while quitting. It also offered an escape from the nicotine cravings which otherwise felt all-consuming at times. and gave me room to reflect on those cravings. But I definitely needed something else for the oral fixation aspect, like you mentioned, while working or while driving. Hot water/tea is what did it for me.
It's interesting how people find different ways to cope. For me, when I was quitting something, I relied on tea too. It was about keeping my hands busy and having a routine. The warmth helped with the stress. Everyone figures out their path. Some use one thing, some another. Just finding that balance is key. It's good to hear that you found something that worked for you.
I got to a point where I knew it was all or nothing for me with gambling. I'd had breaks where I'd have a month or two off, then reset my bet levels to something manageable, but it would always end up the same way. No matter how much I won, it was never enough, and an even bigger one was coming soon. Sometimes they did, but even that wasn't enough, and I'd lose that too. I was tired and knew I couldn't continue. I just needed help from someone who knew what they were talking about. It's been almost 3 years, and I'm still recovering financially, but doing better in every other way.
It's tough when you realize something you enjoy has turned into a problem. I had a friend who struggled with similar issues. He'd win a bit, then lose it all, chasing that next big win. Finally, he reached out for help. It took time, but he's doing better now, focusing on his life instead of the gamble. It's good to see him finding balance, even if it took a while to get there.
Weed can be much more destructive for people's psyche. Cigarettes are mostly just bad for your body. I'm not a hater of weed BTW. I just don't understand how people could substitute these two substances cause they do totally different things. Cigs just give you a buzz which doesn't impair your function, while weed gets you high and can absolutely shoot you out of this reality, lol. Also, most weed is more of a relaxant/sedative, while nicotine is mostly a stimulant.
I get what you're saying. I have a friend who switched from smoking cigs to weed thinking it'd be a healthier choice. At first, it seemed fine, but then they started to feel detached from reality and just couldn't focus. It's interesting how people think they're making a good choice when the effects are so different. Sometimes, understanding the real impact is key in making those decisions.
I got to the point where I was basically asking death to come hang out as a homie for life too. What they say about addicts having to hit a low before they get help is spot on. Just everyone has a different low. And yes, an addiction is an addiction. I'm being very careful right now with soda and sugar, lol. I think the gym is what has saved me.
It's wild how different lows can be for everyone. I had a friend who really struggled with that kind of stuff, hit rock bottom for sure. It took a lot for them to turn things around. The gym ended up being their escape too. A simple routine and focus really helped. It's interesting to see how people find their way out of those dark places, even if it's just through something like working out.
I helped an old friend move this summer in Arizona at 2 p.m. during humid monsoon season when it was around 117 F out. I even brought water and snacks. They provided nothing. She was a dick when I asked, why 2 p.m.? And she didn't even lift a hand the entire day. I also helped that same friend fix their AC unit, and I even paid for the parts. She was rude the entire time I was fixing it, telling me exactly what to do and how to do it when she has zero HVAC background. Meanwhile, the whole time, I couldn't even get them to hang out with me, unless it was her asking for a favor for 2 entire years. We no longer speak because I called out some of her behavior, and she went absolutely batshit crazy on me. My life started improving drastically after blocking her number for peace.
That sounds like a tough situation. Helping friends is one thing, but when they just take advantage of you, it becomes frustrating. It's like your kindness was taken for granted. It's good that you stood up for yourself in the end. Sometimes, cutting off toxic people is necessary for your own well-being. It's wild how things change once you remove that negativity from your life.
Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.